Hi there. Welcome to the second of our videos about the novel of The Lodger. In the other video, I talked about the woman who wrote the novel. And in this video, I'd like to suggest some ideas or elements of the novel to pay attention to as we read it. Right off the bat, as you begin the novel, you'll notice how carefully Mrs. Belloc Lowndes sketches the circumstances in which the Buntings live. It's very nuanced, it's very specific. She has a feeling for the indicators that mark someone's social class, their financial circumstances. And it's clear that the Buntings are on the edge of desperation. They're in a situation that probably speaks to the situation that many people are confronting right now in the economic downturn that we're experiencing. So they're right on the verge. And studying that in the first two chapters helps us appreciate what it means when this lodger comes to the front door and seems to be the answer to all their problems, offers to rent a room and therefore to provide some money. So the detail and the specificity of these first chapters helps us understand Mrs. Bunting's reaction to the lodger all the way through the novel. So as I said in my other video, the emphasis in the novel is very much on her psychological processes. And I said that the novel was inspired by a conversation that Mrs. Lowndes overheard in which someone said they knew a woman who was a landlady and who feared that one of her tenants might be Jack the Ripper at the time when the Ripper was carrying out his crimes. Now, one would think that part of that psychological dilemma was, what if he is and what if I do? But there's another element to it in the novel. What if he is, but what if we need his money or we might lose our home? Then what? Maybe the reaction isn't just suspicion. Maybe someone in that situation looks to justify not being suspicious. And that's part of the complexity of Mrs. Bunting's psychology. Look at how she reacts to the character, the lodger, and how she tries to justify his behavior and try to tell herself that maybe he isn't really this killer, the Avenger, the Ripper-like character that they keep hearing about. We also want to pay attention to how the lodger is characterized because it's somewhat different in the film. How are his habits described? What does he react strongly to? What do we learn about his background? And how does this influence Mrs. Bunting's perception of him? Another character who is a remarkable contrast, probably the strongest contrast between the novel and the film that Hitchcock directs, is the character of Daisy. Now, in the novel, Daisy is Mr. Bunting's stepdaughter. In the film, she's the daughter of both of them. So there is some distance between Mrs. Bunting and Daisy, and we might look at how she reacts to Daisy. Is she purely a loving mother, or is there something more complicated about it? And how does that distance affect her sense of Daisy and her awareness of whether or not Daisy might be in any danger? Another character who's definitely different between the novel and the film is the character of the detective. Now, in the novel, you'll see the detective is on the hunt for the Avenger, the Ripper character. He is working in collaboration with Scotland Yard. The middle of the novel has some interesting chapters about the investigation of crime at that time. Like other good mysteries, it gets into the nitty-gritty. So Belloc Lowndes gives us a sense of the process and the detail. But tell me what you think of, or I look forward to hearing you tell me what you think about the character of the detective and how the detective is represented, because it's very different and much more complicated in the film. And then finally, we want to notice the role of mass media in the novel. This is a really interesting element of the film and one that Hitchcock clearly enjoyed. So in the novel, the characters learn about the crimes of the Avenger through the newspaper. And there's a wonderful description of how Mr. Bunting is in his home and he hears the newsboys the people who sold the paper on the street, saying, extra, extra news about the Avenger. So they get their news through the paper. The story takes place before radio, obviously before television and the internet. So this is where they find things out. So you really get a sense of the importance of the paper as a source of news, that this was their primary means of finding anything out, in addition to what the detective might let slip. But in the film, they certainly only read the newspaper, but Hitchcock will actually show us the newsroom, how the newspaper is printed, how it's distributed through trucks. I mean, he gets into the nitty-gritty of the machinery of newspaper production. So it's a very vivid dramatization of the process by which they get their news. So it's interesting to think about the role of mass media, such as newspapers, in the novel compared to the film. So these are some of the things to keep in mind as we read the novel. Mrs. Bunting, the circumstances in which they live, the characteristics we learn about the lodger, how you would describe Daisy as a young woman, the role of the detective, is he someone we would trust, and how mass media plays a part in all of these things. So hopefully this will guide you in your reading as you tackle the novel, and I will look forward to talking with you about the novel at our first live meeting. Thank you again.